and welcome back to the Shakespearean Shrew. I am your Shakespearean Shrew, Karen Feiner, lover of all things bard. This podcast is a decorum be damned entrance into understanding all of Shakespeare's stages, for there are many, and the players on it. But we're not talking about Shakespeare today. We're talking Jane Austen, who I also love. And so we are at the Mermaid Tavern talking with some of Austen's ingenues from the cast of OSP's holiday show, the Jane Austen Christmas Cracker. And I will let you all introduce yourselves. Who would like to start? Charli, do you want to go?
Sure. Hi, my name is Charli Henn and I am playing Elizabeth Bennett.
I'm Bethany Woemmel and I'm playing Marianne Dashwood.
I'm Naomi Love and I'm playing Lydia Bennett.
My name is Kalie Sloan and I'll be playing Jane Austen.
Lovely. We are also going to have Zanine Fletcher Hall with us. She will be joining us shortly. She is playing Mrs. Bennett. So, how many of you have ever been, has anybody been in a Christmas Cracker before, or is this a first time for everyone?
This is my
Oh
first.
my goodness, this is
all
our
of our
first year.
Yes, there's so many people in the cast that are returning, so that's crazy that there's so many of us.
I love it. So, you're well into rehearsals now. The show opens in about 2 weeks,
Oh my
right?
goodness, 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
So, what's your favorite part so far? What is your favorite part of the Christmas Cracker?
I will always be partial to the dancing.
I agree, that is also my favorite part. It's been so fun learning all of the dances and getting to dance with the cast.
My favorite part is the audience interaction. Lydia in particular spends about half the show picking random audience members to flirt with and interact with, so that's really fun for me.
That sounds right for Lydia.
I think my favorite part, especially playing Jane Austen, has been finding that balance between like being in the show and also being an observer of her own work that is happening as the show's going on. So I think finding that there's a scene where I spend times just rewriting, and you can see it in the show. It's really, really fun, and I think that's been my favorite moment, is workshopping that.
How metatextual.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes, but it's been really fun trying to find that balance of being in the show and also being on the show. Yeah.
So I have seen it before, so I'm coming back for my second time. I'm very excited. All the parts you mentioned are parts that I absolutely love. So for the dancing, are the dances more traditional dancing? Is it more of kind of new ideas of the older dances? How did they kind of come about? Any thoughts?
So for the dances, from my understanding, most of them are actually from like the traditional dances.
time period?
In our script, they have like the specific like years that they were actually made, so they are like kind of like historically accurate. Obviously, there's some parts that are like slightly different just for like modern use, but I think there is one modern dance that's from like 2013?
2004.
2004. Thank you.
I was 10 years old on that. Yeah. Rebecca might kill me, so I'm not gonna swear by it.
So there is one modern dance in there, and so it's been a lot of fun, like kind of seeing the differences, but also like the similarities between them and how even modern dances are still trying to attribute back to the original dance moves that they did.
We also do a little bit of a modern take to it, as like we don't follow all the social rules that they would have followed back then, like how there's like a gentleman line and then a lady line, and the ladies only dance with the gentleman. We sort of just like the ladies could dance the gentleman's part, or like we could dance together instead of like in the 1800s they wouldn't do that.
Very nice. Yes, I like that. So, as you're thinking about these dances, the interactions, that's a big one because your audience can volunteer as tribute and join you and dance. So what are some of the great aspects of that, the challenging aspects? What does that do for you all in terms of rehearsing and understanding? We've got to bring some people in here who don't know these dances and figure this out. What does that mean for you all as actors?
Well, Rebecca, or did you guys?
You go first.
Okay. Well, Rebecca has very much so we've had some cast members, especially people who've done it in the past, who have been like, I'll pretend like I don't know what I'm doing here. And so we rehearse like guiding them and explaining, like very gently guiding them to the next move, or you know, just like ways of trying to make it simpler for them and for them to follow along. And yeah, that's been really interesting. What do you say, Naomi?
I was gonna say, like, for me, acting, or not acting, dancing does not come naturally. I'm not a very good dancer, but my character is, and she loves dancing and she does it all the time. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna volunteer myself to be the picker for this dance, which is the easiest. So I'm not like, you know, looking like I don't know what I'm doing when I don't actually know what I'm doing.
I love it. Play your role.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also think that dancing has kind of introduced a lovely, I think with acting there's always a sense of play, and there's always a sense of trying new things, and whenever you have new people who have never done this before, there's going to be a lot of new things to play with. And so I personally struggle a little bit with improv, but I think this show will definitely strengthen that aspect of, for me, especially with helping people through the dances and being like, oh, you're over here, come join me. Different things like that, but yeah.
And I think in the end, it always ends in laughs, whether we end up getting switched up and all of a sudden you're in a new role, you're on the other side, anything like that. It was great, I think, especially within the cast, just bonding and laughing it off, but it'll also be very fun to throw like audience members in there, and when it happens in the real time, it'll be fun.
I think that's such an interesting comment to make, because dancing, especially at that time, right, when we're thinking about, you know, the 19th century, it was their place to build connection, to build any kind of intimacy. Mm-hmm. And it seems like not much has changed. Like, it's still that chance for you to build connections with one another, and, you know, kind of, and even beyond each other to the audience.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Naomi, you talked about as Lydia.
Yes.
One of your favorite parts is the audience interaction.
Yes,
which
definitely.
is perfect for Lydia because, I mean, like I said, that is the encapsulating essence of Lydia.
In my callback for Lydia, the first thing that Karis asked me is, how do you feel about audience interaction? I love it. Yes, I love that. I'll do the audience interaction. I'll give it to me.
I found my colleague. So, what is it about improv, audience interaction that you love so much? And not all of us love it so much, so what are the difficulties of it? So this can go to anybody.
Okay, the most difficult part for me is staying in the accent while improving, because it's easy to improv in character. It's harder to think of what you're going to say in character and then translate that from my natural American accent to the British RP that we're supposed to be talking in. So I'll like sort of think ahead of time of what I'm going to say and then translate it into British. Translate it into British. Translate it into British.
The other kind of English. But I love the idea of, so improv isn't as improv as maybe some of us think of, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we think of it as like, yes, like spur of the moment, but it might be more thought out
Yes.
than that. So Bethany, so you said improv is not necessarily your favorite part. What are some of the struggles with improv, other than accents and that sort of thing? Are there any other struggles in terms of that?
Well, I think personally as an actress, I've struggled with improv a little bit because it's very vulnerable to put yourself out there without a script or anything in hand. It definitely pushes your instrument to like really have to like play, and you have to be committed to everything that you're playing. And like similar to like what you're saying, remembering that there's a ginormous time difference between present day and then. And so like even sometimes when we play our games, we have a game called Forfeits, and it's where each person puts a thing in the basket, and we've just been using our personal belongings, and like someone will pull out a click pen, and we're like, what is that? we're like, what is that? Oh, it clicks! Is it an instrument? So just different things like that where we're trying to bridge the gap between, oh, well, we're also not in modern times and we have to remember that. But yeah, always committing to the bit and always committing to everything that is being given to you, giving yes and energy.
Excellent.
And to piggyback off of what Bethany just said there, I think it's very interesting with having a real person and playing that real person, because I feel like the improv, there's like bounds in which you can use pieces of the stories to improv with, and then also you can use like moments of Jane and Cassandra in real life, their letters and such, to use that to aid in when you're talking to other characters. And I think that's been interesting to experiment with, but also having some liberty to experiment with. So yeah, that's been a really, really fun thing to do. Yeah.
So it's like the idea of the experimentation of it, and then it sounds like kind of one of the biggest obstacles is bridging those gaps, whether it's accent or time period, where it's things that you're not necessarily used to. It's not something that's part of your everyday aspects that you're kind of having to pull through in a moment where there's no script. Love it.
And I think another thing specifically for Elizabeth, she's not the kind of character that would talk very much with strangers, but she's one of the much more recognizable characters in this show, and so people in the audience who know Elizabeth would love to talk to Elizabeth. And so finding like, oh, when can I talk to an audience member but make it still Elizabeth?
Right.
And it's not, just, oh, I'm an actor, don't you want to talk to me?
Fair enough. That's a good point. I'm an actor, don't act like that line. It's a good line. Is it Mrs. Bennett? No. Oh, it's not Mrs. Bennett. It's Alright. So, okay. We just talked to a relationship therapist. So...
Great segue.
Really weird segue.
I got a little context too.
That was my context. That was it. Thus, I have questions. So, making me laugh too much. Okay, so we just talked to Danielle Cuss about relationships, specifically about Jane Austen's relationships and the characters that she has, and some of the beneficial and detrimental relationships that exist in Jane Austen's books. So I have to ask, what character from Jane Austen's works would be your ideal partner?
Affecting emotions.
I mean, I would say, like, everybody always, makes fun of me because they're like, yeah, the leading man is who you kind of fall in love with. And I was like, nope, Elizabeth Bennett.
She's witty. She's witty. She has self-respect. I mean, it's all the things you really need.
And she loves books. I'm like, yes.
So many good qualities there.
So many.
I feel strange about it, but I think I would also say...
It's okay, that's yes. As you should, though.
Right? And Jane Austen would be all about the self-love aspect of that as well. So it works perfectly.
This is so cliche, but I'm definitely a Darcy fan. My first introduction to Pride and Prejudice was the 2005 version, and yes.
And yes.
All for that. Yes, and funnily enough, I was talking with my partner the other day, and we're like, which one are you? And we were like, well, you're kind of like a Mr. Bingley on the outside, but like in private, you're more of a Darcy. And I was like, I think it's just so funny. I feel like Elizabeth and him just sit at home and laugh about society and just laugh together about different things. And I was like, that is my ideal. But yeah.
My ideal is Mr. Bingley, I have to say. I like that he's like, he had the immediate like attraction and not, I know that Mr. Darcy like redeemed himself and that he's like the ideal and he's like very rich and very handsome and he like apologizes, but I still just can't get over how he treated him at the beginning. I don't like enemies to lovers, I'm sorry, it annoyed me. But and he apologized to Naomi. Well, it was more complicated.
Some subtext.
Yes. I liked Mr. Bingley and Jane's
Just immediate
yeah, like
connection.
love at first sight. Yes, I like that trope better than the enemies to lovers trope.
And he's definitely more of just like the general, like,
Yeah.
authentic guy. There are no real disguises for Bingley.
Yes, yeah.
He is who he is.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would just say Elizabeth as well. I had to agree on that one. I just have always really admired that character growing up, also got introduced the same way. And so I very much so have always enjoyed how true to herself she is and how she stands up for others as well, and stands up for her sister especially. I have 2 little sisters, so I feel very passionately about sisterly bonds. So I think that she just does a great job of standing up for her family, especially when Mr. Darcy so adamantly dislikes her family, the pride aspect, if you will. So I think that I just love her for that, for sticking up for her family and sticking up for what she believes in. Yes.
Well, and the fact that she says no to Mr. Darcy.
Yes.
Yeah,
Like, that's pretty freaking impressive because she has a family, and this is one of those issues where you're like, oh, because she protects her family, she stands up for her family, but at the same time, she rejects a man who could take care of her entire family.
Twice.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. And I think that also has to do with Jane Austen in real life, how she got engaged for one day, the next day she decided to break off the engagement because...
Speaking of Mr. Darcy.
Oh, and there he is.
And there
The man
goes
of the
Mr.
hour.
Darcy.
There he goes. But I think that, like, especially in my head, Cassandra and Jane, like, Cassandra talked her out of it because it wasn't for love. And I think that's so interesting about Jane's parents is that, like, Jane's father was a poor man, or a poorer man than her mother, and she still married him for love. And so I think that very much so influenced her and how she wrote her characters, who were very motivated by love.
That's a great point, because really, Pride and Prejudice she wrote when she was 21 years old.
Yes.
And so, anybody here 21 years old?
Yes.
Oh, man.
Charlie just had a birthday.
Yes!
True. No, earlier this week.
Happy birthday! But so that's pretty incredible that she wrote this and had that much insight into her society and maybe herself at 21 years of age. Interestingly, Persuasion was the last book published after her death, which has a very different tale if we're talking about Anne Elliot and, you know. But so with, you know, I think we see almost the evolution of Jane's perspectives as we see kind of her books and the characters and relationships she writes. Although I'm not, you know, Erin Woods and I were talking. We did a previous interview, and she was like, you know, Darcy is the man that you fall in love with when you're young, and then, you know, Captain Wentworth is the guy you want when you're older. And I kind of get that, right? Because Captain Wentworth, he will work for it. He is not afraid of, like, he's not made for money. He kind of builds himself. And so, we're like, and there goes Anne. We're just seeing like a cast roll by.
Yes.
But it's interesting because it's almost like each of these different characters, there's similar relationships, like similar ideas, but such different characters.
I was talking about this today with one of my friends about how, because we were just talking about the different stories that are in the show and how similar the relationships are between each character, but like there's just slight differences, and it's interesting how that changes as she writes them throughout her life, because obviously she starts with Pride and then ends with Persuasion, and just like very similar overall, but like there's slight changes, and you can see changes in her views of her society and like people around her. But yeah, I totally agree with that point.
So I like that you talked about like they're all slightly different. They all have different characteristics. Each character has different characteristics. So what is your favorite characteristic for your character in the Jane Austen Christmas Cracker?
I think for Elizabeth, she is so unafraid to say what she's thinking and to do what she thinks is right. There's no fear in repercussions because she feels she's absolutely where she needs to be.
I love that confidence.
I think with Marianne, obviously, sensibility. She's very, very connected to her emotions and very connected to how she feels, and that she holds that very strong and dear to her. And she doesn't really care about how others will perceive her for how she feels. And I think that's something, I think that bravery and that strength is something that I admire about her with her own emotions and opinions towards things.
Nice. Mrs. Bennett! Go ahead, put your stuff down and then you can join.
I've been thinking of something positive to say about Lydia. I guess I could say that she's very honest.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, you know what, to be truthful, I know we're not supposed to judge our characters as actors, but she is a spoiled brat. It's very fun to play a spoiled brat, and it's very fun to play my relationship with my mom, because it's the subtext is there that we are very similar, and she sees herself in me, which is why she definitely plays favorites there and indulges me in ways that she definitely shouldn't have. Which, yes.
So it's funny because, don't worry, I'll get to you in a moment.
No, you're fine.
But it's funny because we were just talking about that because Lydia drives me crazy.
Oh my god.
Of all the characters, I'm just like, why did you do that? What are you thinking? And but then I was talking to Danielle Cuss about it, and she was like, she's a victim of her circumstance. She's a victim of the relationship with her mother.
Yes.
And I'm just like, oh.
I guess you're right.
I guess you're right. Okay,
Generational.
I feel some empathy.
Yeah.
But also,
Yeah.
Is it, Lydia?
I mean, on that note, I did have to remind myself. I was like, she's 15.
She's
not exactly. She's not fully emotionally developed or mentally developed.
It takes 25. It takes till 25 to have full cortex development.
Yes. I was just watching the 1995 Pride and Prejudice on Disney Plus, and I got to the scene where she runs off and elopes with Wickham, and I'm like, I was listening to that actress does a fabulous job. I've been trying to copy a lot of her mannerisms. She's like, I've run off and got married before any of my sisters, and now I have status over them, and they should all be jealous of me. But in reality, she has no idea what that means, especially back then when mothers would tell their daughters what happens on the wedding night. On the wedding night, yeah, and I was like, okay, Lydia, you're 15, can take it down a notch.
Yeah, but that's all she knew, right? That's all her mother told her.
This is your goal.
You gotta get married.
You gotta get married. Gotta get married rich too.
Yeah, which that didn't end up
I hear she did not
going as planned. The uniform.
Yes.
You gotta make some compromises.
Drawn to the red coat.
That obsession with the red coat. That was a bad life choice, Mrs. Bennett.
I wonder if he could wear his red coat at our wedding.
Oh, yeah. No. You're annoying me so much. Just make better life choices.
I know, make better life choices. Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, you make a great point. She's 15 years old. How many of us make great life choices at that age?
Yes.
I think that proves my point.
Yes.
All right, Jane.
I think my favorite quality about Jane is that she's I think her motivation in life is to really just amuse people around her, which is what drew her to writing and what drew her to, especially if you look at her letters to Cassandra and also to her brothers and her mother and father. She would write a lot about, she'd write little quips here and there to make them laugh. And the funny thing is that she thought Cassandra was the funny one of the two of them. She called her the greatest comedian of their time or something. And I just think that's so sweet that she did strive to be this biggest comedian to these people around her and entertained people, but she also elevated Cassandra, and she gave her that title instead. So it just shows their bond and how much they truly did love each other. And I think also their love for each other is a great quality of Jane, and having a fun time with Olivia and experimenting that chemistry with each other has been so much fun. Just yeah.
You have a different relationship with your sisters than I do with mine.
I'm the oldest sister, so I think that, I don't know, that has a piece of it.
I'm the youngest, so.
There it is.
But I do think she plays a lot with sisters, whether it's the Dashwoods, whether it's, exactly, the Bennetts. And we've got the good relationships, right? We've got the great relationship between Jane and Lizzie, and then we've got the more tumultuous relationship. All right. Hashtag goals. Okay, so we've talked favorite characteristics. Now we can go into the least favorite characteristics. What? And that might be easier for some of us than others. So whoever has them can start.
I'll start. So I often tell the people that are like, oh my god, you're playing Marianne, that's so great. And I'm like, she's annoying. Like the first time I read the book, or I guess the only time I read the book, and like watching the movie, she's very annoying. Because I think because she does hold her emotions so near and dear to her heart, she doesn't care about what other people think, and sometimes it gets like, yikes, that was a bit embarrassing. And so I actually relate to her very similarly. I think she's a lot like how I was in middle school. And I think that's why I cringe so hard when things happen. But I think that's definitely the thing that it's weird because I love that she's like that, but I also hate that she's like that. And I think it's just like age and like the little bit lack of maturity there. But yeah, I think that's what I hate the most about her.
Understood. I get and I think that's a lot of us we see, and that's probably why Lydia drives me so crazy because I'm looking back at young 14, 15-year-old me, and I'm like, oh god.
Yes, no, exactly.
The chill pill needed to be had.
And you're just like, oh.
100%.
Yeah, so you're just looking back and you're like, oh, like you said, you just cringe because you're like, yep, I've been that stupid, yep. And that's always a hard thing to watch, where you're like, oh no. Okay. Who else?
Putting the mirror up.
Yes, putting the mirror up, exactly. Which is what theater does, for better or for worse. Sorry.
All right, Lizzie.
I think for me, it's right there in the title, the pride. I love that she gets over it in the end, and I think that's partly why one of the last scene with Elizabeth and Darcy in this show is my favorite, because she finally gets over herself. And she gets like a lot out of it. She's able to like use her wit and all of this, and like she is very obstinate, which is good to a certain extent. Yes. I don't know if I articulated that quite right, but the pride.
Do you want to go?
All right. Yes, I will. I dogged on Lydia a lot in my last. Like,
Poor Lydia.
My least favorite characteristic of Lydia is probably her. How do I put this into words? Her like selfishness, maybe, if that's the right word. I'm thinking particularly of how like she didn't think about how eloping would affect the rest of her family, like the rest of her sisters. She was just thinking about herself and wanting to get married right away when like that wasn't the procedure, it wasn't her time yet. Like the older sisters were supposed to get married first, not to mention like she just ran off and was living with Wickham before they were married, which not only tainted her, but like by association could have.
And that's a great point.
Yes.
Like if your sibling had done that, your marriage prospects would have been.
It reflects badly on the whole thing.
Yes, and that would have, So you're absolutely, like, I think that's a really good quality to pull out, where she just only saw short term. She only saw herself.
Exactly. Yeah. She only wanted to elevate herself.
Yeah.
I think it's a questionable quality. Going back to the letters, because it's her own words and it's her being her, I think that she was a little bit of a flirt. And every single one of her letters to Cassandra, she's talking about how some man was there and how he had a very handsome face and like they're the life of the party. And she also would go against Cassandra and some social norms and go out to like private dances and like with like this certain Irish gentleman that she was seeing, and people say that he was either like the greatest love of her life or like just a flame. And because we don't have a lot of her letters, because Cassandra burned them for just protecting Jane, that's the theory at least, we don't know exactly why. My theory is that that was like her great love, and then she spent the rest of her life just being a flirt. And that's my truth for her, and I think that makes so much sense that because she's the youngest daughter, and so I think that that's just kind of her. I think that's a piece of hers, and she's just a little bit of a flirt. Yes.
Which, I mean, was kind of amazing for the time period.
Yes.
Right? Because they're just like, again, the fact that she turned down people
multiple times. She would be like, there was one letter that she wrote, and she was like, this is the last time I'm going to be hanging out with this guy because he's probably going to propose to me tomorrow, and then of course I'm going to turn him down. Like, what? Okay. But I think that's just so interesting.
Yes.
To turn so many people down when the status quo is to get married as fast as possible. So
to anybody that will
propose
it for you, because as a woman being unmarried, you are in an incredibly uncertain position where you've got very few things to sell that can support you. And some of them are not good, right?
Well, yes.
But so that idea for like a woman at that time period, deciding that they would rather turn somebody down, I mean, gotta kind of love her for it.
Iconic.
Yeah.
It's iconic.
Yes. And she's writing too.
And she's writing, and apparently she wrote all of her, or at least her final drafts of her novels in one place. I don't remember the exact name of I don't remember. But she wrote all of her novels at one place, which is her brother's place. She lived with her siblings throughout her life, and they all supported her. The same thing with Cassandra. They would live with their siblings throughout. But yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to see like the development of her books, right? Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, and then I'm gonna do it again. Emma, and
Nope, you had one before Emma.
what was before Emma?
Was it Mansfield?
Yes.
Yeah, Mansfield.
I always forget Mansfield Park. Sorry, Mansfield Park.
I also forget Mansfield.
Don't we all?
But yeah, so like just like the structure and the order of the stories that she creates, and then of course Persuasion, where it's a 27-year-old spinster. I'm like, whoa, a whole 27. But again, for the time period, that was way beyond marriage age. So I do feel like those letters and her books all say so much about who she was and how she fought back. I really like Danielle Cuss's word, microfeminisms. Where
Interesting. That's good. Hey, that's great verbiage. Yeah.
I was like, I will use this. I like this. And every time I do something that people disagree with, I'm going to be like, microfeminism. Stop questioning me. Don't question my agency. But yeah, so this play and what you're all doing, it's all based on interaction between you and the audience, because it's one of the most interactive plays that OSP does, if not the most. I'm gonna go with the most. And then also between you and the characters, because it's all about connection. right? It's based off of romantic or in terms of, sisterly, familial connections. So how does that drive the play? Because I think most stories are either plot-driven or character-driven. And so with Austen and with all the characters that we brought together, it's very clear that it's character-driven. How does that work for you all in terms of how you connect to your either romantic interest, your siblings, all that?
I think that Jane has kind of like a motherly bond with all of her characters, especially in moments where, like, I was just talking about this the other day about how there's a moment where Elizabeth is being very witty with Darcy, and I'm sitting in the back playing cards, and I'm watching it happen over my shoulder, and I feel very, like, there's a moment where we have a connection, where we make eye contact, and it's right after she makes a quip, and I just kind of, and I'm just like, just proud of what I've just written. I'm just like, oh yes, I wrote that. But like very proud of Elizabeth for doing that, and very much so I feel like she identifies with her in that she has to stand up to these social norms, stand up to these men, and hold your ground. And I think she very much so is just very proud. That's her daughter right there, that kind of thing. And the same thing for when Eleanor and I just knocked something over, I'm sure. But where Eleanor is having the big moment with the romantic moment there. It was Edward, thank you so much. My brain was fogged. Where they're having this moment and they're having this very beautiful exchange of admitting feelings. And I think that Cassandra and her are both observers of that, so they're both observing that moment and they have dialogue about it. But I think that she just like lingers in that moment. And I think that like she does not end up with a love interest in real life. However, I think that a part of her does crave that love, and so I think her seeing the love happening is kind of a wishful thing as well for her. She's like, I wish that would have kind of happened to me. And so she writes about that kind of thing and how the perfect love that does exist, she just doesn't have it. So I think she wants the perfect love for her children in a way.
She's trying to write it.
Yes, exactly. And she called in a letter to Cassandra. Once again, going back to the letters. I'm so sorry.
No.
This is my resource. Going back to the letters, she tells Cassandra when she's talking about, it's a day after she wrote Pride and Prejudice got published, she calls it her baby. So I think that really is what drives me to think that she feels very motherly over these characters.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Any other thoughts?
I think for Elizabeth, and especially with the other characters in Pride and Prejudice, as an acting major, we do these exercises where we have like all of us walking around in a room, and every now and then our teacher will say, okay, choose someone that you want to stay away from, but don't let them know that you're staying away from them. And I think especially with Darcy and Lydia being an embarrassment, my mother enabling her, it's a lot of that, especially when there are other scenes happening or like we're functioning around the scenes or just in the party. There's a lot of me like, that one's there, I'll walk this way.
Playing keep away.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's also been fun, like making decisions on whether my character would like the other people that are in other Jane's books, and like deciding, oh well, I like this person, but I don't like this person as much, and like playing with how that would look in the interactions that I have that aren't pre-planned. They just happen because we're just walking around, and then in the future, once we have like an audience, like how I feel about the people that I'm interacting with as audience members, being like, oh, I like you very much, or toodles, like, so I think that's been another portion of like finding another part of a character that isn't written out. Jane didn't write that out. It's just you figuring out whether that aligns with what Jane would have decided, I suppose. But yeah.
Lydia does not have a romantic interest in this show. It's like Jane Austen's Christmas Wrapper is kind of set like in the middle of all of the books, where like so at this point in time, like Lydia actually thinks that Elizabeth still likes Wickham and wants them to be together, even though at this point she's lost her attraction for Wickham when she finds out that he's a pedophile and etc. So yes.
Good read.
But I do have a lot lot of interactions. Like, I know we have some like small interactions that aren't always planned. During the dances, for example, we kind of like get to choose our own partner, and I was like, let's make this one a sister dance. And I don't remember, I think, is it Alice?
I think it is Alice.
It's Alice, yeah, that we dance together and we're like partners. So that's fun. And during the dances, there's a lot of time for us to like make conversation, especially if we're like out for part of the dance. We kind of like talk in character, which is fun. And actually, Sydney, who plays Anne Elliot, I've kind of latched onto her for like a good 2 scenes in a row where both of us are not doing anything. We're just still there on stage, and I'm just like making conversation with her, even though we're not from the same book and our characters don't actually know each other. We do in the show.
And I love that, and I love that idea of kind of thinking about who your character of Austen's creations would you align with, and would you be like, no.
I've heard about you.
So are there any ways that you make those decisions? Like, what do you use in terms of your character's personality that kind of you're like, I want someone similar, or is it more of like somebody who's gonna be like the opposite and then like kind of tone me down a little bit? Like, how do you?
Well, I definitely think with Marianne, she loves finding people who are similar to her. I mean, both Willoughby and Colonel Brandon have similarities to her that she latches onto, especially with Willoughby.
Oh, Willoughby. Why?
Indeed. And so I think she loves being with people who are similar to her but also understand her. Edward doesn't quite understand like the things that Marianne talks about. He even mentions that in our show about how she sees something and she can see something completely different than what he does, and he's like, I just like it straightforward. Like I like straight fine chivalry, and but she still appreciates Edward and still appreciates him as a brother. And then I think there's like times where she butts heads with her sister because their sense and sensibility completely different. And so I think there's definitely characters in the show who kind of align with Eleanor that she's like, oh, I mean, I like you, but we don't mesh well. So I think there's definitely people that through my own research of like who in the show is what, and I'm able to make those educated guesses of what Marianne would feel.
So, taking yourselves out of, now that you're out of your books, you're in a world where you're kind of meshing against other worlds.
Like Disneyland.
Do you think you're... Yes, exactly that.
Jane Austen's Disneyland.
Jane Austen's Disneyland.
That's the best way to think about it. Jane Austen's Disney Christmas land
special, yes.
So are there any other characters where you were like, I think we should have been together? Like, why did I end up with this person? This was a much better choice. Have you had like any realignments or thoughts about like other characters that you think you would work with better? Or is it so entrenched that you can't see anyone besides that person as your person?
I really don't think that anyone other than Darcy could really handle Elizabeth. They're easily stubborn.
Yes.
And I fear Elizabeth would like just trample a lot of the other characters in the show.
That is a great point.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same. I feel like there's not, within our show, that I think Marianne would connect to as easily as that. I mean, I think if there was another Edward who was not for Eleanor, I think maybe. But I think she also thinks so much of Edward as a brother because of the relationship he has with Eleanor, and she immediately adopts him into the family, and she wants to keep him. Yeah. So I think it makes sense as to how it ends up. So
Yeah.
unless Willoughby has a change of mind.
Oh, Willoughby. We were talking about that, and we're like, desperate times call for desperate love affairs. Like,
I suppose.
why him? Like, why jump? Like, and Danielle was like, yeah, it's kind of like the Princess Buttercup and the Wesley moment where like Wesley goes down the hill and Buttercup jumps on after him, and you're like, don't do it, he's not worth that, don't do it.
That's exactly
He's just not
what
worth
it's like.
it. He's like the one male where you're like, if he jumps, let him go.
You know what? I think money plays a part in Jane Austen's, because every relationship that I'm intimately familiar with Pride and sensibility, it's always money, and it's whether it's the relationship they have with money, because Darcy doesn't care about his riches. He's willing to throw away his money to help the Bennetts, but then Willoughby is like, he's like, well, you're poor. I gotta get going. So I think different relationships with money also plays a part in that, in Jane Austen's novels.
Yeah. And I mean, Darcy has a lot of money to throw away, so that also...
Is he the richest out of all of the love interests, do you guys think?
I think so. I would think
so.
Darcy
He's
is
got the highest
£10,000 a year or something?
Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah. He's got the money. Not to take away from the romantic gesture.
Well, I think that's interesting too, like how, I mean, it's a fictionalized romance book and all of the good characters end up with rich men and all of the not so nice characters usually end up getting their karma in a way.
Yes, which is, again, like you said, a very interesting play and showcase of the society and what signified success or not for women, right? Because just like Shakespeare's works, we have to have a marriage. We've gotten to the end. Who's getting hitched?
Happy ending. Maybe.
Maybe. And then we can see what comes next. we're just gonna leave it end scene.
I think also this is so off kilter, and it has to do with what you said about like how the bad characters kind of get their karma. I think that has to do with her father being part of the clergy, and like he was very much so taught her to be very moral, and she was very Christian. So I think that has something to do with it as well. Is that she very much so wanted to put the morality that she had in her books.
That's a good point. Which is funny for, as you said, a flirt.
A flirt who has morals? I don't know. What? She's got a nice powers there.
Yeah. So why should everybody come see A Christmas Cracker?
You might get to dance with Mr. Darcy.
Oh, that's a good one.
We have so much fun. We have so much fun. And I cannot imagine being an audience member seeing this show.
Yes.
So much fun. And especially bring your kids. Like I feel like my first introduction to theater was like an interactive theater experience, and now I'm pursuing it as a career. So I think that could really just get some kids get their foot in the door in theater and introduce them to this wonderful world of creativity. So I think that'd be really great.
Definitely a family-friendly show for all ages.
Indeed, and it's just it's so pure. Like coming to rehearsals has been very, very low stakes, and I have really enjoyed the process, and I think that people will enjoy just watching, even if they don't get up and dance. Having some Brahms and it's just so fun, and if you love Jane Austen for anything, you'll enjoy the show.
Oh, don't you look stunning?
What is that?
The gloves too.
You can come sit with us and tell us why everybody should come see the show.
Zanine, come sit with us. Everybody, this is Zanine. She's perfect.
You're good. You're good. Yep. We have a seat for you.
Well, thank you very much.
You look beauteous.
Oh, yes, Mrs. Bennett is elegant. Oh, my goodness. I love the red.
Yes.
So Christmassy.
It is. And we're just telling everybody why they should come see The Christmas Cracker.
It's a phenomenal show. It's a family show. It's interaction. It will make you smile from start to finish. You can participate if you want to. You don't have to. There's no need. You can follow along. Christmas crackers are a delight. A Christmas cracker at the end. It is everything that makes you feel Christmassy. I love it. I love this show.
Zanine, say how many years you've been doing this.
This is my 5th year doing it, only the 4th with OSP. I did a year with Reduction doing Jane Austen's Christmas Cracker. So.
And so, what is your favorite part of the show?
Ooh, I think my favourite part of the show is interacting with guests. I love when they come and ask me a question. That the one year I was asked what kind of roses grew in my garden, which was, was great. I love the fact that audience members always surprise me with questions and asking me how my family are. Seeing people just delight at Jane Austen. It is always makes me smile.
I have to ask one more question. How would you describe your relationship with Mr. Bennett?
He's not good enough for my daughter. He is a very handsome and
Mr.
wealthy-
Darcy or Mr.
Oh,
Bennett?
sorry, no. Mr. Darcy. I was like, no, Mr. Bennett. Well, Mr. Bennett is, he's my husband and I love him dearly. Nobody's ever asked me about Mr. Bennett. It's always sort of the other character. So Mr. Bennett is very sweet. He's a very nice man, but he's not very social. So he likes to stay at home, have his pipe in front of the fire, and just enjoy the quiet while all the women are away from the house.
I can't imagine why he'd enjoy your absence. That just seems absurd.
I do encourage him to do these social outings, but it's just not for him. He does suffer with his gout, so he needs to sort of to sit and to rest.
I'm so grateful for all of you coming and chatting about the Christmas Cracker. So everybody, just so you know, the Christmas Cracker runs from December 5th to the 22nd. It is selling like hotcakes, Christmas hotcakes. So make sure you get your tickets as soon as you can. Bring your family, bring your friends. It is an amazing time, and for people who have not been to OSP, it's an amazing introduction to OSP and all of its many amazing actors and attributes. So hopefully we will see you all there. And again, thank you all for coming and chatting with me.
Having us. So fun.
And just remember, all the world's a stage, and you too can be a shrew.